And then I'll go ahead and go live. If somebody could please let me know when they see it on my timeline. Okay, I think we are live. Let me go back to Zoom. And then if you are interested in sharing this to your page, this would be a good time to do it. Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome friends. Welcome new friends. We have look at this gorgeous grid. My gosh, it's powerful and beautiful. So we are here today on our monthly panel chat to talk about the divine feminine. And we have a guest moderator in addition to some new guests and new panelists today. So I'm going to turn this panel chat over to our moderator, Jenny Glick.
Thank you so much, Kay. It's such an honor and privilege to be with you here. Many of you who I know, some of you are new. So I want to invite us as we get started in honor of the divine feminine to take a breath, to ground, to arrive. I always like to bring my energy into my breath, my heart, your sits bones, the soles of your feet, wherever it is you might be finding yourself. And if you're listening to us or watching us live on Facebook or Instagram, taking a moment just to orient to your internal life, the interior space, which can often just take one or two breaths, and just notice what it's like to sense the qualities that are within you as you arrive here in this moment, giving yourself the gift of setting down everything that's happened prior to this moment today so that you might be really present. For me, part of the invitation of the divine feminine is presence, relating, being in the present moment. So we're going to begin there. A couple of breaths, maybe feeling your belly get full as you breathe. When your lungs get full, you might even make a sound as you exhale, as you inhale. So, just feeling that quality of aliveness. Feel free to move your body. Again, the feminine is curvy, at least for me, right? And so, really inviting that movement. Just notice how we're beginning this conversation in a different way as we're in these linear boxes, in these little Brady Bunch boxes on a screen in a box, right? Electronically, we can bring in movement, breath into the space. So, thank you to all of you who are here live. If you're watching us on Facebook, be sure to make a comment. I think we might have somebody who's moderating any comments or questions. Kay will keep an eye on that for us. If you have any questions, comments, if you're watching this on recording, please drop any comment and tag any of us if you want to go deeper with any of us in that space. We'd love to engage in the conversation. And so, with that, we're going to dive right in. And our first question is, what is the divine feminine to you? And I would love to. I'm going to have a couple of our panelists answer that question. But before I do, I realize I didn't introduce myself. So let me do that really quickly. My name is Jenny Glick. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a certified sex therapist. Been doing this work for 25 years. I work in the online space. And what I feel so passionate about is where psychology meets soul, meets meaning, and meets the mundanity of your everyday life in marriage and motherhood, in career and entrepreneurship. And so, since I've given my panelists a moment to think about their answers for that first question, I'm going to invite Cerise forward. So, the question for you, Cerise, is what is the divine feminine to you? And the follow up questions will really be about your body. How do you feel it? How do you sense it? How do you know it? So, Cerise, you have the mic.
Well, I actually spent a lot of time thinking about what the divine feminine is to me because I really only started using the term about 5 years ago, never used it before. There's been an absence in my life of understanding or knowing what it is. And so for me, it's about that nurturing, it's about creation, it's that energy. And that's how I see it. Almost similar to yin yang, with masculine and feminine energies. So that's what it means to me in
So
the
I'd
most
love to
simple
ask
way.
a follow-up question. So when you say you never used the term before the last 5 years, do you feel like it wasn't there or you didn't have a way to engage with it, whatever it is, right? Because you were just oriented to one way?
Yeah, I think there was such an absence of it in my life, that I was able to see and understand. I think it was the masculine energies were so prevalent that there was that absence of the feminine, in growing up, and then, career driven, and so I didn't really, I now that I've done so much work, I understand there needs to be this balance, the duality, and I've studied and learned so much about it now. Today but I'm going back to when I first, came to realize it or recognize it. It's taken a while. I was very old in first understanding and using the terminology of the divine feminine. So yeah.
Well, I know a lot of people can relate, and a lot of women, especially in midlife, start, and especially with social media. And I think the last 5, 6 years, there's been such an upsurge in coming into relationship with the divine feminine, which is why it is we're having this very timely conversation to explore what it is that it means to us. So I'd love to go over to you, Lisa with an E, and hear from you what it is, that the divine feminine, and that's Lisa Spravka. Uh,
Spravka.
Bravka, thank you. I'd love for you. And then Lisa Espinoza, you're next. Okay. When I said Lisa with an E, because she said that's that, and then I realized, oh no, I'm going to confuse you too.
Oh,
So Lisa S.
um, well, thank you. It's really cool to be here. When Cerise said 5 years ago, I was thinking it's the same for me about 5 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, and I also didn't have any kind of sense of it. I was a little bit, I knew that I was suppressing my sexuality, but I thought that was kind of like religious programming.
Mhm.
Um, but I had a big old vision that told me exactly what divine feminine was and how it can be expressed. And I could share that if that's of interest.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to. You can't just say you had a vision and then you move on from that. What?
So, I was dreaming, but I was conscious of it, and I woke up and remembered everything. But I had the masculine in me was gold sparks, and they started down at my lower torso, and they went up my right side and over my head. And what it showed me was that these two symbols came that represented protection and support. And all of a sudden the gold sparks retracted back down to the lower torso. And on my right side, blue ribbons just unfurled. And I feel like I just was very familiar with it all. And I woke up and I felt so much more feminine than I've ever felt. And I took a picture of myself and it just to give me an idea of what that softness looks like. But the big message is that you can't really express it if you don't have the masculine
Mm.
for it to be the ground it comes out of.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that. Thank you very much. And Lisa Espinosa, I'd love for you to share when and how did you become aware of the divine feminine and how maybe has it changed your life or your perception, your perspective on life?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Cerise and Lisa. That was so beautiful, both of what you shared. Yeah, I was thinking ever since I knew this was going to be the topic, and I was thinking about when, I mean, I definitely never heard that term growing up, but I would say, and I was raised Catholic. So growing up, it was always kind of a male divine face. But then I guess now it would be 20, no, like 30 years ago. Like when I was married very young and I got a divorce, and it was this like suddenly the church that I belonged to was, I was just kind of like shunned. And that was the moment. And it's so interesting because I remember I had this little picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe, who I never had connected with, even though she's very much a part of Mexico. My parents are Mexican. Like, of course, I knew of her. But as I was going through that like very intense time, so I had 5 children, I was going through a divorce. It didn't seem like at that time anybody in my life was supporting me. And I had this little print of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And for some reason, I think it was the Divine Feminine as mother. Like I just felt her calling to me, just like I'm here. So I felt it as compassion, as receptive, as nurturing, what my mother at the time couldn't give me because it was just bringing up a lot of stuff, wounding for my whole family that I was in the process of ending my marriage. And so I think initially it was like a divine mother connection. Like that's how I felt it. And I really connected deeply. And it's still a very important part for me, that aspect. And then as I explored other spiritual traditions, connecting with like Kali Ma, then was like, for example, that archetype, that fierce mother, right? Up to that point, it'd been like soft, tender, compassionate, which I needed. But I also knew Kali Ma is like mother bear. I'm here to protect you, fierce, but I'm also here protecting my children. That really came into my life. And so that was, I don't know, 15 years ago or something like that. And that was a different, that's when I started to explore like more of all the, it's mother, it's fears, it's then the sexuality, it's, I don't want to say the word messy, but there's, I couldn't find a better word, but it's like labor, right? Like there's so much, um, having given birth to 5 children, and now I'm a grandmother. I was there when my granddaughter was birthed. So that was like the first time, like being there. I just was really like, oh my gosh, it was so, all of that. It was beautiful and it was painful and it was sacred and it was sometimes unbearable at the same time, all of the things. So that's what comes to mind when you ask that. Like, that's
Thank you.
sharing.
Thank you, Lisa. And I'm really hearing this theme from the three of you with these energetic qualities, right? Like the straight lines and the curves and the masculine and the feminine and the needing both and the messy, the aliveness. And so I'm picking up on those themes as we're going along. And Joan, I would love your voice in here for that same question. When and how did you become aware of the divine feminine, and how has it changed your life or your perspective on life?
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. So, working to be succinct and clear. For me, similar to what Lisa just shared, I think it was a shift in my life, which for me happened to be the conception of my daughter, who I knew would be a girl. And I happened to be at home with my family and attending church before my baby shower that they were hosting for me. And it was the Feast of the Holy Family. and, and as the priest was talking about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and I was pregnant with what I knew was a daughter, I was like, WTF? The Holy Family? What? How do I bring my daughter into a world, into a reality that sees that. So I certainly had had connections with aspects of the feminine, like Kuan Yin and Mary Magdalene prior to that, but that really kick-started things in a significant way. And so the feminine for me, because I was raised with a tremendous amount of misogyny, not just in my family, my culture, my church, started out, it needed to be the sacred feminine because there was some distinction about that that felt really important, that the honoring of the feminine was indeed sacred. And honoring the feminine within me was sacred. And certainly I come from that lens of the needing both, the masculine and the feminine, and there being the whole divine sacred aspects, and then the ways that those can get distorted through our lived experience or all the things. So I don't know if that's how has it changed my life? It's brought me back to myself in ways that I never could have without the Divine Mother, without the faces of the feminine, without I also relate to the Shakti, like that creative force. Um, so it's brought me back to me. It's brought me back to the divine in a more embodied way.
Mm.
And it's given me a vehicle of letting my daughter know that she too is sacred.
Mhm. Thank you, Joan. And again, just to tease out some themes before I ask our third and final Lisa of the Lisa takeover here in our in our panel, the next question, just to pull out the themes of for all four of you, you describe this kind of hunger, like an absence, something's not there, something that you want. And what's so beautiful about that is it almost feels like it's innate, right? That there was something in you that's like knocking that says, I need to look somewhere for Joan WTF. Like, like something is arising within you, which is pretty cool, right? That it's so spontaneous that way. So, Lisa, your question is, what has been your relationship with the divine feminine in your life?
Hmm. Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. I guess I just have to maybe preface it by saying that, when Kay first brought this topic forward, I can't say that I had extreme clarity about how to verbalize it, and I've kind of been a little bit challenged with it. And it isn't that because it's not something I'm not experiencing or observing. But for me, it feels like it's more in sensing and acknowledging and observing rather than naming, if you will. Um, so I'll do my best to use my words. I guess for me, as I've been leaning more into it, my sense of, and my mind is like, I'll just preface that also by saying that I think probably more scientifically sometimes and like quantumly, so that's lots of times how I can connect with things and to understand them. So I experience it as more of like an energetic frequency or a consciousness that's coming. uh, I say coming into the planet, but I think it's really because humanity and the planet are increasing in frequency and shifting our dimensional space that we're occupying. And so I think that we have more access to the divine. So when I think of divine feminine, for me, the part that stands out more to me personally is the divine part, the divinity. which that divine spark, of course, is within all of us. So I feel that as humanity and Earth are elevating into this frequency to receive this, I feel like it's the divine in us that is embodying it and carrying it forward. Also kind of in that, I don't know how else to say it except for like kind of like that scientific way, like the electromagnetism, the electric and the magnetic, it's the masculine and the feminine. And, all humans have this, right? So for myself, I notice when I'm bringing in more of the divine masculine, if you will, with like Cerise was saying earlier, about the yin and the yang, right? That those sort of principles of the light and the dark and um, um, light and as in sunlight and earth, um, plus minus those sorts of things. So that's kind of how I connect with it is bringing in more of the divine masculine and the divine feminine within us to occupy that space and then be in that space of balance, I
Mhm.
guess. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you for naming that. I'd love to just ask you before I go on to Sarah. You said it's hard to put into words, and you put it into words beautifully. But I'm curious, like, how do you sense it in your body, right? How do you
Mhm.
sense that divinity in your body if you were to explain it to us?
um the two words that come to me, or three actually, would be peace, clarity, and alignment.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
Thank you. Thank you so
mhm,
much, Lisa.
mm.
And Sarah, thank you for bringing nature in the wilderness into
Yeah.
this
My
call
pleasure.
today.
My
I would
pleasure.
love to know what's your relationship with the divine feminine?
Well, I feel like, am I popping up on the screen correctly here? It looks, oh, I don't see myself. Um, I feel like for me, it's always been a part of my life. I grew up homeschooled, so while kids were sitting in buildings under fluorescent lights learning how to compete with each other, I was sitting in the garden in a field of poppies and just watching them dance in the wind and learning about how much nature feeds our being. And I I've always felt just such a deep connection to both the divine feminine and masculine. I wasn't naming them in that way when I was a child, but I was witnessing the flow within myself and within my life from a very young age. And as I grew, I think the part of the divine feminine that really grew with me as I aged was more of the ferocity and the boundary setting aspect, the part of me that stood up for myself when being violated and was more adamant about making sure that I was heard and seen and witnessed when I needed to be. Um, and when I was 40, when I was about to give birth to my first child, I felt completely grounded in the experience of I'm going to give birth outside in nature because this is what I'm here to do. Like all of my life is kind of like that, where, I want to just approach everything as naturally and fully embodied as possible. I witness so much synchronicity and beauty in my life all the time, and I attribute that potentially to how much I am at home in that energy in my life. And I've certainly experienced tons of the chaotic elements of life and the divine feminine as well. But I just I just feel like it's always been a natural part of who I am, and a lot of people will tell me that they see glimpses of that sort of energy through the way that I live because I don't live like a lot of other people around me. So I yeah, it's just at home in my being.
Mm, mm. That's so beautiful. And now I'm curious, how is it that you live that you don't live like some of the people around you? If you wouldn't mind just sharing us a couple of ways.
Sure. Um, when I was a teenager and people were saying, you got to shave as a woman to be, looking good, or you got to wear makeup, or you got to, I explored shaving a little bit. I explored makeup. I did the things, but I never felt like it was a requirement for me to be the embodiment of who I am. I, um, I don't use shampoo or conditioner or soap or, I live my life very naturally. I try to wear all natural fabrics and, walk barefoot on the earth every day. And I do a lot of online work, but I try to limit the screen time in my whole family's life as much as I can. Um, I really feel like I trust in life in a way that a lot of people don't. I've never feared what's coming. I've never really felt afraid of death. I've always just felt like, every aspect of life and the flow is just a part of our experience here. And so, um, as far as like how I live compared to other people, I'm not coming from a place of trying to fit into any box ever. I'm always just beating my drum with the natural beat that comes from within me. And that's always happened for me. What, honey? Oh, that's okay. Sorry, my daughter is talking to me.
Good,
Um,
good.
so yeah, it's just always been a part of me. I started teaching yoga when I was 19, so I was very much involved in wellness and meditation and movement. And I grew up, from age 3 being a dancer, so I grew up with music and art, and so I've just always felt very connected,
Mhm.
however connection can be for me. It's always been there. I've never had this point where I'm like, yeah, I got to this age and then it was there. It just was always there for me.
So great. Thank you for sharing that with us,
Sure.
Sarah. It's helpful, given what you shared, that other people will look at you and say, you don't do it, the way others do. And also that you are a reflection of some aspects of that feminine by listening to yourself, right? So I really appreciate your examples for all of us here in our audience. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Kay Eck, why do you think this topic is such a hot topic right now? And for the last, 5, 6 years, I mean, dare I say, 2020 was a maybe a moment of awakening. So why do you think now?
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that something's been awry on planet Earth for a while. And, um, it seems obvious to me that it's been out of balance. And if you just, so I had a massage earlier this week, and my massage therapist was like, the divine Mother Earth is here, and she wants to make sure that she can be involved in your panel chat on Thursday. So I think that the some of the degradation of the planet has been very much a outward expression of the imbalance in energies, and so I think we're sensing that the time has come for, and I agree with Lisa that we've reached a certain frequency as a collective, that the divine feminine is rising into prominence. And it's not a matriarchy. It's not meant to fight anything, but it's a balancing energy that brings divinity as a whole and us with it into wholeness. So I think that's why it's an important topic. And I think it's easy for us to see how the feminine aspects are lacking in our society and in our lives. Very much, push and control and achieve and yeah. So I think that's
Mhm. Thank
yeah.
you. And I might continue that, that thread a little bit, we're a couple weeks after Mother's Day. And as a therapist, I've spent almost 25 years the week after Mother's Day hearing about shitty Mother's Days and the resentment about Mother's Days. And I don't want the gift, but I want acknowledgement. And it got me to thinking. So I wrote a little piece about, to your point about Mother Earth, your massage therapist wanting to bring in Mother Earth. Thank you, Sarah, for bringing her, in where you're located. But this sense for me that the Mother Earth, when we're in right relationship with the mother, we're giving offerings, right? When I go into my garden, I'm making an offering of my voice or sound or blessing herbs because I'm in right relationship just naturally. It's not because it's Earth Day and I'm doing it. I'm doing it to be in right relationship. And the best, I think, organization of Mother's Day, or the best way to experience Mother's Day, might be thinking about providing offerings, right, to the mother, right, as a way of honoring. And we've lost that practice in this consensus culture that many of us live in. And I'd love to continue that conversation, Cerise, with you. If you don't mind sharing a little bit about how it is that maybe you have experienced the divine feminine being connected to the patriarchy or not connected. Like, how do those two concepts or realities square with each other?
Yeah, like growing up, like I was sharing earlier, it was, I felt like I was raised in a very patriarchal society. There was very little acknowledgement of the feminine that I was able to see or really understand. But I do believe that it doesn't have to do with gender, and it doesn't have, there's divine masculine and divine feminine in me, in all of us, and that we have to be able to figure out, how to be in balance and harmony with, because you need both, and both are really beautiful, and there are times for, for some over the other, and just getting in touch with that, and being able to see it, it can be very helpful, in your day-to-day life. But it wasn't until, like I said, until I started really understanding. And I think you're right from a timing perspective. I think it might have been around, 2020 when this started becoming, I became more aware of the divine feminine, in this context. But I also look at it, Sarah talking about nature too. I right now I'm seeing and hearing so many people going back to nature, which, is so beautiful and so needed. But again, because of that imbalance that Kay was talking about, so just bringing it all together, it's very relevant to today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cerise. And Lisa Espinoza, a really small question for you. Where do you believe the divine feminine comes from?
Okay. I was like, a small question.
I know.
First of all, you shocked me by calling me I was like, oh, it's not me.
I know. I'm shaking it up. I don't want you Lisas to get all lazy here.
Okay. Ask that a question again?
Yeah. So where does the divine feminine come from? And do we acquire it? Like where does it come from?
I mean, I guess, Sam, when Kay invited me to this, I was so surprised how easily I was like, yes, okay, cool. And then I saw the questions and I had a brief moment of like, should I do research? Right. But I was like, no. Because I was like, the divine feminine wants me to just show up and just experience it and just bring whatever comes. So that's what I did. And for me, I mean, words are so limiting, right? Even divine feminine and divine masculine, they help us. But to me, God, consciousness, universe, spirit, the great mystery, there's all these names for it, is beyond those labels. But if we ask it that way, then of course, I believe it emanates from the source of all, and we all have it. But it's also the divine, as we've all said in different ways, it's also the divine masculine, right? So really, when we start to, it feels like some of those questions aren't meant to even be answered intellectually or even logically, like they can't be. It's more of a felt sense, right? It's more of this, and I don't feel you acquire it. I feel like it's innate. It's within us. and then we go through Earth School, or however we want to look at it, Earth School, or yes, the frequency, the being so dense, but I definitely agree it's shifting. Like we forget all of that, right? Many of us. I mean, I don't think it's fully forgotten because even growing up in patriarchy, there was a sense it was there. So, to your little question, it's my answer because, yeah, I feel like that would be answered in a ceremony or in like being out in nature or just feeling love for each other. Like that's really the answer than words, but
Thank you.
for doing it to me.
Thank you. What a beautiful answer. I really feel that, and how wonderful that we're here to have a conversation and not ask Chat GPT, right? Or Claude. Like that's not the point. It's to be at human pace and in the human process. And so I really appreciate, Lisa, you taking us through the process and naming all the different cairns on that little walk you just took, to get to what feels like such an essential answer. It's what I love about actual human in real time relating, is to be able to be with that journey that you took us on. So thank you. Thank you. So we're going to continue with these really light questions with Lisa, the third Lisa. I'm going backwards now. Talk to me about the divine feminine and dark feminine. Like, are they different? Is it the same? How do you square those two concepts? How do you think about the dark feminine?
Am I the third Lisa?
You are the third Lisa.
Okay, just checking. And that makes you guys the cult jam, if you know that reference. He's like, what are you talking about?
I love it.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm doing and I think a number of us here are too, right? We're a lot, I would say all of us were probably on our healing journey and we have been for a long time, I would guess. I feel like that's been a lifelong thing for me, right? Probably many lifetimes. And I feel like as more of us are emerging into the world, if you will, with our, collective wounds, right? Because it feels like people now are more able to name their traumas, right? And we're sort of able to own them in a way that does not invite or come forth from a place of shame, which isn't to say that we don't carry that, but I think that we're, more understanding and more acknowledging of it. And the reason I bring that forward is because I feel like a lot of this has come through that dark, if you will, the shadow. I think it's more than a shadow, actually. I think it is the dark masculine and the dark feminine, right? Which, of course, we most of us experienced primarily through our parents, right? And which isn't, that's been part of my journey, which is to not blame my parents so much as understanding that they were also born to this world, right? And I look back on my own journey as a mother, and I certainly can't claim that I was, the divine mother, during all my 35 years, right? And I think that's part of our journey is in, acknowledging and alchemizing that darkness, um, which has been the womb that we came through, right, into this, you called it this denser reality, right? Um, and I feel like right now, those of us that are alive on the planet, and of course these really sweet incoming generations, right? I have a 4-year-old daughter, granddaughter rather, um, who is bringing in this new energy, right? And embodying it. And I feel like, as collectively that we're all alchemizing that, right? As we're all on our own healing journeys. I'll bring this up too. My daughter asked me a really thoughtful question, recently, last week or so. And we were talking about some of the societal challenges that are coming online, one of them being AI and, sacrificing our inherent rights to, um, we call it legally, we call it privacy, but really it's like to our identity, our physical identity and our body and our human, right? To be able to take those metrics, if you will, right? When we're sitting at a stoplight or whatever. And so I was talking to her about that, and she asked me the most beautiful question, if it was enough for her to be raising a child in the way that she was raising it, her child, Fleur, to be contributing to new, this new earth, this new consciousness, right? And I didn't really give her an answer, I told her that was really, that was for her to decide, right? But of course, that's a very beautiful thing. But I think that's how we're all shifting that, right? Alchemizing it and transmuting it, that darker feminine, by not disowning it and by not feeling shame for it and not letting it continue to hide in the shadows of our own lives, but instead, bringing it out into the light and transmuting it within ourselves and within our families.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you
Mhm.
for sharing that with us. And Sarah, I'd love to pass the mic over to you if you want to share, if you're willing to share about how you orient to the divine feminine and the dark feminine, different faces of the feminine. So how does how do you orient to that?
Well, I feel like the light of uncertainty, the chaos, the unhinged, unraveling, the messy, as was mentioned earlier, I see that as the divine feminine too, as that shadow or dark side. And I try, because of feeling connected to the concept of yin yang, to see light and dark as equal parts of the experience as a whole. I don't attach myself to the need to try to fix everything, to try to bring all the shadow to light, even though it feels like a deep soul purpose of mine to help others to bring themselves more fully into a healthy and balanced state. Um, it's not eliminating all darkness, but simply acknowledging and integrating and learning about how those aspects of ourselves play a part in life and how they teach us things. And who am I to say that it's everyone's purpose to become fully enlightened beings of light? That's not my um thought to project, because I don't know, for every human being their soul path might be to come and live a very dark and shadowy experience. And um I think the fact that so many human beings feel deeply troubled by the injustice in the world and the wrongdoings that are happening everywhere, I think that is just a reflection of there being this universal calling to, to bring about more awareness, to bring about more balance and healing, so that the shadow is integrated versus just operating without humans being aware of what they're even doing and what forces are controlling them. And um, I growing up in yoga teachings, I really gravitated towards chanting to certain goddesses, and Kali, being a very sort of dark figure, was one example of one that I resonated with, because I did go through a lot of trauma, or have gone through a lot of trauma in my life. And that ferocious sort of like reclamation of power that you see in a goddess that wears the skulls of her enemies around her neck, blood dripping from her mouth. Like, I I see that as being a very healthy part of being on this planet, to acknowledge that aspect of the divine feminine. And my own daughter, she says the wildest things. She's going to turn 6 in July, and she said to me last night that when our dogs die, she's going to eat them because she doesn't want the meat to go to waste. Yeah, just kind of like wild concepts are just. She's a very fierce being and has no fear, and just like embodies a lot of these qualities of some of these goddesses that are of the darker nature. But one thing I wanted to mention about Kali, something I heard about her that I always loved was, um, she is the darkness, like the darkness of the night sky that holds us all. So it's, we're surrounded by darkness around the planet. And it's important to recognize that that is a part of this experience as a human being.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for that share and that personal share about your fierce daughter. I love it. So good. So, Joan, I'd love for you to step in and, on the heels of talking about the divine feminine and the dark feminine, if we can sort of double click on together the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and maybe this is off script, maybe you want to talk to the dark masculine and the dark feminine. So any of those concepts, how do you understand or orient to those?
Well, over the last 2 years, I have been studying with a Hawaiian indigenous elder that teaches about the inner feminine and the inner masculine, and the necessity of us as humanity materializing before we spiritualize. And the feminine is ground zero. So feminine is where it all begins. And this particular tradition is rooted in the spine and the vertebrae of the spine. And so the coccyx, sacral, lumbar are the feminine dimensions of the spine. And then the thoracic is the masculine. And then the cervical is the integration of both. Mm. So for me, that has kind of flipped things on their head, because there are aspects of that tradition that look a little different and sound a little different than everything else I've heard about the feminine, about the masculine. And so what feels important to acknowledge, which I'll share, is that the feminine is we'll say the arbiter, or she is the essence of the feminine is consent. The essence of the masculine is do no harm, from that tradition. And it's really rooted in, like, all safety needs come from the feminine. And decision and choice are rooted in the feminine. And then the feminine is the one that informs and is the noun. And the masculine is the one that responds and creates. And that through embodying, through coming fully into our humanity, then we reach the point where we can reach our spiritual essence, so to speak. And for me, relating to the dark feminine, I think about the rich, fertile earth is what comes to mind initially. And like Sarah was speaking to, the cosmos. And I think there is the darkness that feeds and nourishes, and there is the darkness that is corrosive or corrupting. But as we know, through Kali, destruction is a legitimate facet of the feminine: destruction, creation, all of that. And in terms of the dark masculine, I would distinguish between distorted versions of masculine or feminine and the use of the word dark, because I do think, particularly in the New Age spaces, that light has become identified as divine, and dark is often associated with not divine. And there has been injury there to humanity, just as there has for millennia related to the feminine and the divinity. So I'll stop there.
Joan. Thank you for that thorough and concise answer, my friend. So good. And Lisa Spravka, I'm going to give you another small question. What's the role, as you see it, of the divine feminine in a culture, and how do you see it possibly playing a role in our future?
First want to say I don't have an answer for that.
Good.
Well, I'm just so moved by what everyone's saying
Awesome.
that I thought of a poem that I wrote, and I think this is kind of answers the question, like and even the role of the distorted. I love what Joan said about not calling it dark. The distorted is to see, we have to see it to know what the correction is. And so this is pretty short. I'm just going to read it if that's
Please.
okay. It's called Softness. Softness, for softness to be seen, for it to be seen as an option, for softness not to be squashed, not to be afraid of softness, not to be ashamed of softness, not for softness to be attacked, not for softness to be changed, for softness to be felt and enjoyed.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Lisa. And what better way on a panel discussion about the divine feminine that when I ask you a question, you say, I have a poem. Like that might just be the role of the divine feminine in a society or a culture, is to answer with a poem, a song, an interpretive dance. Like here's what I have that's alive in me. Right. And so thank you for allowing the divine feminine to move through you in this space in that way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Really beautiful. Really beautiful. So Kay, I'm going to have you follow that up. And I'm going to ask you that question. Yeah. So now you got to bust into the dance.
Yeah.
What's the role as you see it of the divine feminine in a culture or in a society?
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much. In preparing for this panel chat, I thought I had so many ideas, and I just feel like there's been so much shared, and they're all like out the window. But for the last couple of years, my essential question about these big topics is, what is the origination? Or what is the original idea? And when I think about the divine feminine and the divine masculine, it's very difficult for me to separate those concepts from the divine mother and the divine father, or even just the divine impulse and the divine feminine impulse and the divine masculine impulse, or from the origination. So I think about the divine masculine as being, or God, whatever word you care to use, as being the light, and which is all, even the void or the 0 point field, the cosmos, we think of that as being the absence of light, but it's actually all of the light. It's dark, but it's light. So the divine feminine to me, the divine mother, is the expression of the light, which is love. And so I feel like that where we're moving to is the recognition that love is the essential creative energy of all existence. And that power is is central to us. It's essential in us. We have that. We've been gifted with this same creative energy. And so this balancing act that we're going through, I feel like is the rising of the power of love to create. And it's actually not, anything that is created outside of love is distorted. And we have examples galore of that. And so I think we're just learning how to wield this power from a place of sovereignty instead of wounding, from a place of clarity and awareness and understanding instead of a place of distortion and lack and misunderstanding. And so it couldn't be more powerful. It couldn't be more vast, but it also couldn't be simpler, honestly. And so I noticed a few years ago, probably about 7 to 10 years ago, that the word love was coming into the common vernacular. You could see it like in Pepsi commercials and even in corporate vernacular, the language of love was coming forward. So I knew that we were onto something. And I think it's wherever within each of us there is love lacking is where our personal work is. And as a society, wherever love is lacking in the decisions that are being made and the things that are being created is where our collective work is. So I don't think it could be more important. And I think we're only going to see more of it. I know in my own life, I just wrote about this in my newsletter that I've been having these experiences where when there's like a connection with another human being who I don't know, or perhaps I do know, there's when you're open and soft and vulnerable and honest, the connection is like this amplified love that I cannot describe. It is so incredibly amplified and intensified, and it just shimmers throughout my whole body and the field and the energy between us. And so I'm feeling very hopeful that we're going to be living in that kind of bliss as we go. So I don't know, that's my little TED talk on the subject of love.
Thank you for your TED Talk. Standing ovation for Kay. And I know we're at the top of the hour, so our time has come to an end for this session. I don't know if you have any parting words, Kay, before we wrap.
I would love to just throw it out to the panel to see if anybody has anything else to add, because I feel like I've said everything I had to say.
I just wanted to say that this Saturday and next Saturday, I'm going to be performing music that is all about connecting with the divine. And something that's really valuable for me is living in a very rural area where I have access to small community. I grew up in Chicago, so being in a busy place is something that I knew growing up, but now living in a tiny town, it's really great because I feel like I have much more access to sharing that love that is needed. And I'm doing that through my art and through my music. And I hope that there's going to be more opportunities for everyone to experience that love that Kay is mentioning, that feeling of, when you're so raw and honest with someone, to feel that connected. It's such a gift.
Mm,
So I'm excited to be, having that opportunity right now.
mm. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, anybody else?
Is there anything you want to say, Jenny?
No, this has been just such a gift to listen and to interact with all of you. And thank you so much for the invitation, Kay. It's always fun to see who shows up. And what better way to end than a conversation about live music in a tiny town and love. So that's beautiful.
Thank you so much for joining us, panelists. Thank you, everybody, for watching and joining in. And we look forward to next month's panel chat. We're going to be talking about anger. The great follow-up. Bye, everybody.